We were on the same wavelength. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'm going to tell you about the author of those lyrics. Who wrote the lyrics to that song?
St. Francis.
St. Francis. And so she didn't know I was going to talk about St. Francis, and I didn't know she was going to sing about St. Francis. But there's a lot of misconceptions about St. Francis. You know, we think, oh, St. Francis, he founded the Franciscan order. He was kind of a big shot. The truth is that he served out of selfless service. He served out of a spirit of service that dedicated his actions to God and dedicated the results and let them go. When he had set up the Franciscan order, it's true, and then he got divine guidance intuitively that he was to go to the Crusades. It was the last Crusades, when the Crusades really weren't up to much good, I got to tell you, and he wanted to do something to bring peace. So he met with the Muslim leader, Saladin, and he and Saladin met privately, and they found this incredible soul connection. Saladin was a spiritually aware, deeply spiritual man, and of course so was St. Francis, and they embraced each other as spiritual brothers. But as they embraced each other, Saladin said, if our troops, yours on your side and mine on my side, knew what we were doing right now, they'd kill us both. And they tried, both of them, to get everybody to lay down their arms, but they could not succeed at that, and eventually the Muslims won, and Francis went back to Italy, and he went back there, and by the time he got back there, the political people had taken over the Franciscan order. You know the kind of people I'm talking about? I'm talking about the people that know better how to run it. Thank you very much, Frank, but just get out of the way, you know. And so he didn't fight them. He wasn't about those kinds of things, that kind of power. He retreated into a cave, made a nice retreat center for himself, invited people to come and pray with him and visit with him and counsel with him, and he wrote. And his writings to this day are read by everyone, and they're sung in churches. The people that took over the Franciscan order and ran it without him, we don't even hear about them. And certainly they continue to do good work, but their really deep spiritual work is done in selfless service. And yet, in that situation, even though it looked like he didn't win, his soul won. His soul served. I'm sharing this with you because we have to change the way we look at spiritual service. Service, or karma yoga as they call it in the East, is dedicating our actions to God and dedicating the results of our actions to God. I dedicate my actions to God and I dedicate the results to God. Together? I dedicate my actions to God and I dedicate my results to God. And when you do that, you let go of those results and you let things be. And you know that things aren't as they seem, and the things that the world says, oh, this is great, they may not be, because there's something deeper that's taking place. I'm going to share with you a Venn diagram. And it's the meeting that took place between St. Francis and Saladin was a meeting between a Muslim and a Christian. And there's a lot of differences between them, right? But there's something in the middle of a Venn diagram, and it's this green part. What label might you give to the thing that is held in common?
God.
God, love. Where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. What is the name? Naman in Sanskrit is the root of name, and it means to know. And so this is the knowing of spiritual service. And where they met was this knowing, and we have names for it. Some of us call it the Christ in you. Some of us, Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven. It's that place, he said, that is inside you, within you. He said it's held in common, it's held among you. It's what you share together. And as physicists say, reality is only reality when it's an agreed upon shared experience. You've heard about that in particle physics. They find out that only those things that are observed and agreed upon and witnessed, those things are real. And so this kingdom of heaven is the kingdom of increase. It's the increase of good. When Jesus talked about this, he used a lot of different analogies. He talked about something invisible. Invisible power, in their culture, they didn't know what yeast was. They just knew that it grew bread. So he said, it's like yeast. You don't know where it comes from, but it grows and increases the good. When you dedicate your service to God, when you dedicate what you do to God, what you're really saying is, I'm contributing to the good. I want to increase the good. So why be the left tackle for the Bears? To increase the good of the team. Why peel potatoes? To increase the good of the people who are going to eat the potatoes. And I'm sharing that analogy with you for a reason, because I want to share, and somebody let me know after the first service, I wasn't raised a Catholic. So I'm not trying to make a Catholic service here, but I want to ask, how many people here were raised Catholic? Raise your hand. So you may know the answer to this question. What's the best-selling book in the history of the Catholic Church besides the Bible? Somebody want to guess?
Cloud of the Unknowing.
Cloud of the Unknowing. That's very mystical, but I'm not sure that the average layperson would get it. The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Our Brother Lawrence, 400 or 500 years ago, was the least of the least. And Jesus said that is the least of these who are my children. And he was somebody who just peeled potatoes. And the reason why he said he peeled potatoes and took care of things in the kitchen is because he couldn't do anything else. But everything he did, he dedicated to God with such a light and with such a consciousness that people took notice and they came to him for counsel, including the bishops and the archbishops and the cardinals. And people wrote down the things he said, and he wrote letters to them, and just 62 pages in this book. But it's the best-selling book in the history of the Catholic Church because it's all about the spirit of service. He's a very interesting person. He dedicated everything he did to God, and in that dedication he had a God experience in every potato that he peeled. He dedicated that service to God. And as a result, when they would invite him to take his turn in devotions or in services or meditation or prayers, he felt he was being interrupted from his real work, which is to dedicate his potato peeling and his common work to God. He had such a connection with God by dedicating everything he did to God that it seemed like an imposition to him to have to go away and pray. I love this because it's talking about the spirit of service in the most ordinary things. What we hold in common, what's there in the center is the kingdom of heaven, and it's the ability to increase the good in all things. They did a study of CEOs, and they found the most successful CEOs were what were called good finders. Those are the people who, even in the midst of something was not successful, it was not working, found the good, found a way to work with it. Not the people who had the big ideas, who were grandiose. We all want to be great, don't we? I want to be great. Ministers really want to be great. I had an experience of that this week, and I found out that maybe what's great is dedicating your action to God in a different way. I can talk about this because this is an organization way outside of our church or outside of Unity, but I was invited to present something, and then they started to change things on me and change the time and the date and my topic and my title and my this and my that. And who do they think they are? Have you ever been in that consciousness? Well, I'm just thinking right now. And then I was working on this talk, and I asked myself, what did that guy on Sunday say? When you're in a situation like that, take the affirmation, thank you, God, for a divine idea. Together? Thank you, God, for a divine idea. Thank you, God, for a divine revelation. Together? Thank you, God, for a divine revelation. Do you feel how that steps it up even to another level? Thank you, God, that I lift this up to its highest possibility. Together? Thank you, God, that I lift this up to its highest possibility. Aren't you thinking right now about something in your life, someone, some problem in your life, and you're going, yeah, this might help. But what you have to do then is to let go of your pictures of, I know what the answer is here, and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Of course, you may speak, or you may not, but what they find when people connect with the spirit of service, dedicating your action to God, dedicating the results to God, getting the little I with the dot above it out of the way, and coming from the big I, the capital I, the spiritual self, what they find is you surprise yourself a lot of the time. Gandhi wrote about this all the time. He said, I surprise myself, but people often say, why did you do that? Or why didn't you act? Sometimes he said, it's very obvious that I should take a stand, I should act, and I do nothing because my heart tells me not to do anything. And other times, I find myself speaking out when people say, oh no, don't do anything here, don't act. Martin Luther King was always in trouble. He was a disciple of Gandhi, a student of Gandhi, and he was under fire even to the very end of his life because he would act sometimes when people said, don't do that, don't take a stand on that issue, you're going to mess it all up. Or he wouldn't do anything outwardly, but he would hold in consciousness and in prayer. And what was that about? Well, that was that he was coming from that spirit of service, that karma yoga, that attitude that says, I dedicate my action to God and I dedicate the results to God. Together? I dedicate my action to God and I dedicate the results to God. So, each one of us, this is an opportunity to dedicate what we're doing to God, to let go of the results, and to be in the now. You know, we don't know when we dedicate our results to God, when we take that spiritual step. We don't know how it affects somebody. There's a woman that I'm still in touch with. I just was in touch with her this weekend. And I run the Youth of Unity when she was a teenager. And then years later, when she was an executive at Unity headquarters, she and I were called to be on a panel for the ministerial school students on youth education. And in that panel, they asked us a lot of questions and talked about, in her case, I had run the Youth of Unity, but in her case, she'd been born and raised in Unity, and how did it affect her? And she looked at them and she got very quiet and very pensive, and she said, I've never told this story to anybody, but now I'm going to tell it. No one knows this. But at one point when I was in college, I was ready to commit suicide. I was so depressed, and I felt so down. And then I remembered back to what I experienced in Sunday school, my teachers, and in the Youth of Unity, at the classes and the rallies and the conferences. And I asked myself the question, I wonder which is real, that or this? And just on the outside chance that this is what's real, I think I'll put it off for a few more weeks. And she went and began to put into work some of the affirmations, some of the practices that she learned in the Youth of Unity, but she'd forgotten about. And she went on to become a leader in Unity. Now, where have you affected somebody and you don't even know it? Well, you probably don't know it. Where could you affect somebody? Just by giving a hug or spirit of service, or maybe teaching. I remember my teacher when I was in the Uniteens, when I was in 7th grade. I was her only student, and she would tutor me in meditation and lead me in guided meditations and have me draw pictures and ask me questions about it. Mrs. Maselli is her name, and that's really where I learned a lot of these things that I teach you on Sundays. It made a huge difference in my life. But where has somebody made a difference in your life? Where can you step into service? And it's not the big things, it's the little things. All Brother Lawrence did was peel potatoes, and nobody who was a leader at his time, we don't talk about them, we don't read their books. It's the potato peeler. Why? Because he did it with a spirit of service. And where in your life can you do that? I've noticed people, well, there was one guy who I did his memorial service for his wife. He had nothing to do with our church. He, I think, just picked us out of a phone book. And he was about 80 years old. And he started to come to church because he had a lot of time on his hands. He was a widower, and he volunteered to become an usher. And he started blossoming, he started opening up, and he said, if I'd only known about these spiritual teachings. You know, in Unity, we make what we believe real by our willingness to share it with others. As physicists say, reality is an agreed upon shared experience, but you've got to put it out there. And how do you do that? Well, you do it by praying with people. You do it by giving people hugs on Sunday mornings. You do it by, I don't know. How are you doing this? What can you do in your life to give service, give loving service to God, to your neighbor, to yourself? It's coming from a different place in your life. Living your life not from those outer things that everybody thinks is so important. I love this wonderful quote from Myrtle Fillmore about what the spirit is in the Sunday school, in Unity. She was talking about how we serve children, and she said, our mission is not to entertain children, but to call them out. To always be entertained is to be dwarfed and dependent. To be called out is to follow the harmonious law of each soul's unfoldment. Who meddles with a rosebud? What fingers are deft enough to pry open that marvel of folded beauty? We are wise enough to leave it alone, to follow the glad law of its own unfolding. And our children, have we dealt as wisely with these buds of marvelous possibilities? Have we always remembered that they too must quicken and unfold through the innate law of their own genius? So this is a spirit of giving and receiving. This is truly the expression of true prosperity. When you experience prosperity, it has nothing to do with things or money or anything tangible. It has to do with the ability to give and to receive and to experience what you have in such a way that it makes a contribution to all. I love this quote from Emerson. He said, "If you do what you love doing and do it in needed service, you'll never have to worry about prosperity. Money will chase you down the street so fast that you won't be able to run away from it." Another way of putting this is follow your bliss. Remember Joseph Campbell? He was my sister's favorite professor in college. She said he was her favorite partially because he's the only visiting professor that didn't require them to buy his books. But she said that he talked about mythology, yes, but he talked about following your bliss, taking that which is in your heart and following it. In his case, his bliss was teaching, and his bliss was mythology, and he dropped out of college and studied in a cabin and began to share and write, and it became his vocation. Now, your vocation, it may not be something large. It could be peeling potatoes. Many people are retired. Many people, our jobs are not our vocation. Our vocation is the sharing of the love in our hearts in a very gentle and humble way, like St. Francis. Not trying to get something in the outer done, but living from the inside out. That each one of us can follow our bliss. I was just reading about Dan Aykroyd. You know, he's a person from this area, and he followed his bliss. When he was growing up, he had three passions in life. One was the supernatural, one was police cars, and the third one was the blues. Ghostbusters and the Blues Brothers came right out of that. Each one of us has something that is a joy to us. I remember my mom, when I was talking to her about directing our faith and directing our lives, and she was retired, my dad had died, and she said, "Well, I don't really have anything that I really want to do with my life. I feel kind of empty and aimless and adrift, and I don't know." And I said, "Well, what do you like and what are you good at?" "Well, I don't know. I like public speaking and I'm good at it. I won some awards at Toastmasters, and I'm really good at losing weight. I'm in Weight Watchers. I've done that. And you know what I really like? I like cruising on cruise ships." She ended up being a weight control speaker on cruise ships. She did that for years. I mean, it could be as simple as that, but I'm not talking about the physical vocation, because again, it could be peeling potatoes, but you're not peeling potatoes. You're increasing the good in the world through potatoes. So whatever you're doing, reframe it. Ask yourself, okay, and maybe you're retired, but whatever you're doing, say, what can I do? How can I do this differently? How can I do this from a spirit of service? How can I open up my heart to make this about loving service? You know, we've got that little form, the form of the spirit of service, and twice a year we fill those forms out, and I ask you to check something off and put it in the offering basket or put it in the basket outside of my office. But it's an opportunity for us to open up to the spirit of service, to open up to a possibility of giving of ourselves and getting outside of ourselves. And moving from that little I with the little dot above it into the big I. Moving from the mundane, everyday kind of life to something that's deeper and more profound. And so I'm going to ask that you take that little sheet if you want to, and take it in your hands. I'm going to take my copy of it too. And just take a moment and move with it. And just open your heart and open your mind, but not necessarily that you're going to do this, but somewhere in your life that you're going to give in the spirit of service. I remember reading recently that the same brain center that is stimulated by food, sex, drugs, alcohol, and pleasure also is stimulated even more strongly by selfless service. And there's no hangover involved. I can give with a sense of joy. And so I open my heart and I open my mind to the spirit of service. And I ask, what is my heart? What is my bliss? What is the joy of giving and receiving in my heart? And I just take a moment and I listen. And now I loose it and I let it go and I release it. I go forth to meet my good. Thank you, God. And so it is. And I have one more thing I want to share. This is a very famous quote from Jesus. And it's the problem that he had with the disciples. He tried to share this concept of spirit of service, but they didn't quite get it. And James and John came to him and they asked him, "Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask you to do." And he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" "Well, let one of us sit at your right side and the other at your left." And Jesus said to them, "The rulers and the high officials will lord it over others. Not so with you. Whoever wants to become great must serve. And whoever wants to be first must become the servant of everyone. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." That's what we're about in our church. We're not a minister-centric church. I'm not anything special. I'm just up here doing my job. But we all have something to give to each other. And I know I always get the story wrong, but I know Lynette told me about the time that she and her mom went to hear Dr. Hugs, Dr. Leo Biscaglia, and there was 1,000 people lined up to get hugged afterwards because he'd give everybody a hug. And they were leaving, and her mom turned over and said, "Why don't they just hug each other?
Yeah.
Why don't we just turn and love each other? Why don't we?" It's about that which is in our hearts. And by giving thought to what we have to give in our hearts, that special and precious gift that's in your heart right now, we make it more real. Reality is a shared, agreed upon experience. And as you look into your heart and you see the good there, and you're a good finder, it'll become more real and it'll grow. Thank you. And now we get ourselves into this experience of the flow of life, knowing that life serves me as I serve life. And so I move my heart and I move my mind into this now moment. And the fastest way to do it is to dedicate all that I do in spiritual service to God. And to let go of all the results. To dedicate what we do, what we give, all of our actions to God. And then to dedicate all the results to God. And so to be in this spiritual flow, God, I just want to contribute to the good in life. In a world that has many needs, I want to ask the question, what do these souls need in my life? How can I serve? What does this soul need? Not what do they want, but what do they need? How can I best contribute to the highest good of all? And as I allow my energy to move into my heart, and as I open my heart wide, knowing that life serves me as I serve life, I feel the flow of divine peace, divine energy, divine love. God, make me an instrument of your peace. And let my sowing be dedicated to the highest good of all. I dedicate my actions to God, and I dedicate the results to God. And I let go into the flow, knowing that prosperity is giving and receiving and experiencing what I have in such a way that it contributes to the good. As I move deeper, I take my affirmation in my brochure where it says my prayer treatment for unexpected income. And we speak these words aloud, perhaps taking our hand and placing it on our hearts, beginning with the words, I dwell, together. I dwell in the midst of infinite abundance. The abundance of God is my infinite source. The river of life never stops flowing. It flows through me into lavish expression. Good comes to me through unexpected avenues. God works in myriad ways to bless me. I now open my mind to receive my good. Nothing is too good to be true. Nothing is too wonderful to happen. With God as my source, nothing amazes me. I give freely and fearlessly into life, and life gives back to me with fabulous increase. Blessings come in expected and unexpected ways. God provides for me in wondrous ways. I am grateful, and so it is. Take this into silence and feel the energy flow. Thank you, God, that as this energy flows, I make a contribution to the good. I am an instrument of divine flowing goodness as love and peace and forgiveness and pardon. And as I move with my heart, I serve life, and life serves me. Thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is. Well, this is our time of offering, and in our time of offering, we're going to give in the spirit of service and receive abundantly. So let's take that as our offering statement. Let me say it alone one time. I give in the spirit of service, and I receive abundantly. Together?
I give in the spirit of service, and I receive abundantly.
Silently. And again aloud together.
I give in the spirit of service, and I receive abundantly.
And so it is. Amen.